As tens of thousands of Palestinians return to the devastated landscapes of northern Gaza, they confront a monumental reconstruction challenge. The United Nations estimates that rebuilding efforts will require billions of dollars and could span decades. Clearing the estimated 50 billion tons of rubble alone may take over 2 decades, that's almost 20 years, and cost many billions of dollars. The pressing questions now are, who will bear these colossal costs? And how will political dynamics influence the reconstruction process? Welcome to In Depth. And now we move to a live broadcast of Egyptian Foreign Minister during the Universal Periodic Review session of the human rights situation in Egypt at the International Human Rights Council.
National action respecting diverse opinions and adopting a consensus-based mechanism rather than voting. It encompasses political, economic and societal dimensions. The first phase of the national dialogue produced strategic outcomes where the President of the Republic referred to the relevant state authorities for study and implementation all relevant decisions. Additionally, numerous detainees were released upon recommendations from the Presidential Amnesty Committee. Namely for those eligible for amnesty or pardon before completing their sentence. In the field of press and media, we have more than 580 registered newspapers, 27 licensed satellite channels, and 94 licensed electronic platforms, and more than 14 radio stations. These entities are regulated by an independent council with enjoying the necessary guarantees and powers to issue decisions and subject to judicial review for annulment and compensation. Dear participants, political pluralism is one of the main pillars supporting intellectual and political diversity in the country. The Constitution and the law guarantee citizens the right to form political parties through notification to the political parties committees, which is a judicial nature. The pluralism was evident in the last parliamentary elections. 92 parties competed, 13 parties are represented in the House of Representatives and 15 in the Senate. Elections were conducted with full transparency, managed by an independent authority under full judicial supervision and monitored by foreign media, civil society organizations and foreign diplomatic missions. The most recent presidential election saw the participation of 4 candidates conducted under full judicial supervision, open media coverage, monitoring by international, regional and local organizations. 9,300 polling stations were involved and 14 judges took part in the election process. In conclusion, human rights are integrated, interconnected, with each right leading to another. We aspire for these rights to be a universal achievement enjoyed equally by all, without discrimination, politicization, exaggeration or double standards or politicization. We also call for, we reiterate that Egypt remains committed to advancing human rights through modern legislation and wise institutional policies, drawing on successful international experiences while also respecting the specificities and the needs of the state at the constitutional and society level. Thank you for listening.
السادة الحضور.
Dear participant, the public prosecution in Egypt, which I represent, is part of the judiciary. It's one of the most competent authorities to fully implement international conventions and agreements, those related to human rights, which Egypt has ratified. All members of the public prosecution in Egypt from various grades are judges acting independently without interference from any authority. The public prosecution in Egypt is an investigative and prosecutorial authority. It is competent to take measures in all criminal procedures, investigation and prosecution, and takes measures to protect witnesses and victims according to international law and international commitments in a framework of integrity and transparency. Since 2020, our public prosecution has been fully digitalized and all measures can be immediately tracked by the Supreme Judicial Authorities, and services are provided to everyone in easy, safe and complete manner. The legal recommendations on the work of the public prosecution are about, first, to promote guarantees to the accused in the pre-trial phase. Before initiating any measures, the public prosecution notifies the accused in the presence of his lawyer about the sanctions, the evidence, if he has witnesses from the prosecution or the defense, and he has the right to have a defense counsel, the right to remain silent and to contact his family. The public prosecution receives complaints from legal and physical persons from Egypt and from outside Egypt by any channels, namely legal channels and public channels. We have revised the legal position of all accused detained in the pre-trial phase. There is not a single person in jail in Egypt contrary to the law, and we resort to alternatives to pre-trial detention whenever this is possible. Recently, for instance, we have released a number of persons accused in pre-trial detained in pre-trial detention for terrorism charges, and 716 of them have been released. In the field of countering torture, we act transparent and efficient manner. We undertake monitoring and supervision of all detention facilities and rehabilitation facilities, and we have also public information material where we preserve the privacy of the inmates. We have engaged in 20 investigation and monitoring campaign for 20 detention and rehabilitation centers and 17 police stations since from September 2023 until January 2025. We have also issued a practical guidebook for monitoring and investigation techniques that has been distributed to all detention facilities and police stations. We are continuing on providing training to all law enforcement agencies, and we have established a library for child protection and protection of elderly and persons with disabilities. We cooperate with our state agencies and international counterparts who have been able to dismantle a number of terrorist networks, and we have notified other countries about the presence of foreign fighters or terrorist cells or illegal funders without any abuse of human rights. Our public prosecution is a guarantor of the fundamental judicial rights without any abuse of human rights. Mr. Vice President, as a representative of the Ministry of Justice, it is my pleasure to give you an overview about what we had achieved in the field of human rights. We have issued a system of e-governments in front of our courts. We have also operated a system of e-litigation in our governorates. We have also implemented a project of remote examination of pre-trial detention orders. We have launched the law enforcement project, which targets the digitalization of criminal courts and connecting them electronically with all relevant competent authorities. In cooperation with UNICEF, we have equipped 33 child-friendly courts in our republic. We have established also a number of courts that preserve the rights of the child. We implemented an eco-friendly court in cooperation with many national authorities. At the legal and humanitarian level, human resources level, we have promoted the capacities of all relevant judicial authorities by organizing training sessions with the UNODC. We have launched the National Center and Platform for Judicial Studies called the Academy of Judges in cooperation with the ILO and the program ADWA. We have also appointed women in the Supreme Constitutional Court, Court of Audit, and the Public Prosecution. The death penalty is a legal and legislative matter that is under the sovereignty of the state. It is implemented only on the extremely serious crimes and is compulsory in very specific cases after exhausting all legal guarantees, namely consensus in the judgment, and the decision is also submitted to the President of the Republic, who examines the constitutional possibility of granting the accused person amnesty or to alleviate the sanctions. We also work based on our national values, identity, and principles. Mr. President, Vice President, regarding the accession of conventions, protocols of or lifting reservations, our country is constantly revising our connections and relationship with the treaty bodies. We are re-examining the conventions which we have not ratified or our reservations based on the terms of our constitution and of our law and according to our international commitments. Even if we did not abide or ratify some conventions or express some reservations, we still guarantee the basic rights and freedoms. And we are currently examining joining or ratifying some international agreements. For instance, we have agreed recently on joining the African Charter for the Rights of People and the rights of human rights of elderly persons in Africa, and the African Protocol on Persons with Disabilities. Based on our National Strategy for Human Rights, the Ministry of Interior examines complaints from all citizens that reach us through the system of complaints of the government or public prosecution or National Council of Human Rights or other councils. Our ministry is also taking many measures to monitor any human rights abuses, such as inaugurating hotlines for abuses or establishing ad hoc entities of human rights in all the public entities in the Republic, and to have also some police officers allocated to receive complaints from the citizens and to follow up. From 2019 until the end of 2024, the Ministry of Interior has taken many measures against all those who are involved in abuses, in legal abuses or crimes. We have we have examined 1,203 complaints, and some of them were referred to disciplinary courts or to the public prosecution. Regarding the National Strategy of Human Rights, the Ministry of Interior has integrated human rights curricula in all the programs of the Police Academy and training sessions that are organized for law enforcement or university courses. From 2019 until 2024, we have organized 86 training sessions for those who are working in the Ministry of Interior to train them on human rights in coordination with the UNODC and the OHCHR. These sessions have tackled areas such as Nelson Mandela rules for the treatment of prisoners, combating violence against women, and developing healthcare in the rehabilitation centers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thanks to the delegation of Egypt. We will now continue with our interactive dialogue, and we will start with Singapore. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Singapore.
Mr. Vice President, Singapore welcomes the participation of the Arab Republic of Egypt in the UPR process. Singapore commends Egypt's efforts to reduce illiteracy, having lowered the illiteracy rate for rural youths to 10% in 2022. We recommend that Egypt continue enhancing its efforts to eradicate youth illiteracy. Singapore also commends Egypt's efforts to enhance access to education for persons with disabilities, significantly increasing the number of such students integrated in the education system. We recommend that Egypt continue to strengthen access to education for persons with disabilities. We wish Egypt a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you, Singapore. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Slovakia.
Thank you, Vice President. Slovakia welcomes the high-level delegation of Egypt and thanks for its national report. The Slovak Republic appreciates the constructive engagement of Egypt with the Human Rights Council and acceptance of a significant number of the recommendations from previous review. We still note limited progress in the field of discrimination and violence against women. Therefore, Slovakia recommends to Egypt enact a law criminalizing all forms of violence against women, including domestic violence, sexual harassment, marital rape, institutional violence, virginity testing and honor killing, and also intensify efforts to raise awareness among both men and women of the criminal nature of gender-based violence. We wish Egypt a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you, Slovakia. Now.
That was the Universal Periodic Review session of the human rights situation in Egypt at the International Human Rights Council, where several representatives discussed ways to supporting the human rights movement through modern legislation that benefits from leading international experiences while taking into account the constitutional and societal uniqueness of the state. Other countries, including Singapore, hailed Egypt's efforts in terms of education, especially integrating people with disabilities in the educational system. Also, the public prosecution team spoke about Egypt's efforts in the field of modernizing and digitalizing the prosecution system and the judicial system in Egypt. And the representative talked about the Ministry of Justice, how the e-judicial system in Egypt and the digitalization of criminal courts is taking place in the country. He also talked about eco-friendly courts and so on. Now we move back to our program where we're talking about the reconstruction of Gaza. The Washington Post has reported that tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians returned to northern Gaza only to find their homes and neighborhoods in ruins. Families travel by car, donkey cart, or on foot, carrying what little remains of their lives. Beneath the rubble, the bodies of loved ones still lie, a painful testament to the devastation. Their return follows a fragile ceasefire, with Israel reopening the Netzarim corridor after a delay. Yet the scene is one of despair, not relief. Months of bombardment have left northern Gaza uninhabitable, making reconstruction an overwhelming challenge. With the shelters destroyed and infrastructure in collapse, Gaza's future remains uncertain. Will the international community step in to support its reconstruction, or will political calculations once again dictate the fate of its people? Gaza faces an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe as a fragile ceasefire exposes the full scale of destruction. Over 47,000 Palestinians have been killed, with thousands more buried under the rubble. Millions are displaced. Famine is spreading, and the Strip now has the highest number of child amputees in modern history. The Express US has reported that beyond military operations, Gaza's infrastructure, healthcare, and essential services have been systematically devastated, rendering the territory nearly uninhabitable. The experts warn that reconstruction efforts risk being overshadowed by political agendas, leaving Palestinians in a cycle of suffering and instability. Rebuilding Gaza requires at least 20 to 30 billion US dollars, but the real challenge is political will. Egypt and Arab nations firmly oppose any forced displacement, emphasizing the need for a long-term solution that ensures Palestinian rights. Without decisive international action, Gaza will remain a shattered land, fueling further regional unrest. As Gaza's reconstruction efforts unfold, the immense challenges ahead reveal a complex web of political, economic, and humanitarian struggles.
The ongoing reconstruction of Gaza faces an unparalleled scale of devastation and numerous challenges. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have begun returning to their homes in northern Gaza after a prolonged period of displacement. But the task of rebuilding remains daunting. The infrastructure of Gaza, comprising schools, hospitals, and residential areas, has been obliterated. The United Nations estimates the cost of reconstruction could exceed $20 billion, with Arab states, especially Qatar, pledging financial support. However, the fundamental issue of funding allocation and accountability persists. International dynamics add complexity to this already fragile situation. Israel's role in the reconstruction process remains contentious, given its control over Gaza's borders and the strict blockade it imposes. These restrictions hinder the import of essential materials, directly impeding reconstruction efforts. Furthermore, Israel's policy in the West Bank, including settlement expansion and military operations, present additional obstacle to any meaningful and sustainable rebuilding. The United States, aligning with Israeli security concerns, has emphasized regional stability over Palestinian sovereignty, often reinforcing Israeli policies that undermine the possibility of a peaceful resolution. This geopolitical alignment undermines Gaza's recovery by focusing on strategic interests rather than the immediate needs of the Palestinian population. The successful reconstruction of Gaza hinges on international cooperation free from political interference. It must focus on human well-being, socio-economic recovery, and ensuring that reconstruction efforts do not become instruments of political control, but rather serve as a foundation for long-term peace and stability.
Providing more analysis about Palestine's future, joining us from occupied Jerusalem, Dr. Abdel Nasser Mekki, political science professor, and from Paris, Dr. Majid Boudin, an international law professor. Welcome to both of you, and I would start with Dr. Boudin. Considering the extensive destruction in northern Gaza, sir, what immediate legal frameworks should be established to facilitate effective reconstruction?
First of all, we have to determine what is the party responsible, liable of the damages, and therefore liable to reconstruct and to finance the reconstruction of Gaza. And it's clear that it's Israel here. Then we have to take a step, which is to go to the International Court of Justice and obtain a title that Israel is liable of this massive destruction. And with that title, then the international community must oblige Israel to pay for the destruction. The second point is to establish what is the destruction. The destruction is not only the destruction of infrastructure, it's the destruction of human lives, the destruction of psychological situation, the destruction of mental situation, the destruction of the way of life of people, True. The project of life of people. So this must be added to the destruction of buildings and infrastructure.
Of course.
And this is a very important component. Then we have to ask the international community to not run to just rebuild the roads. This is not the point. We have to make sure that this time each party who is responsible of that has to participate in the reparation. And this is a matter of reparation. And here we have to remember that in the Second World War, Germany, the regime in Germany, the Hitler's regime, the Nazis, were taken liable for the reconstruction. So this rule should be applicable to what happened in Gaza. And we have to build up the matter on this base. And how we build it, the international is very clear on that point. international law will take the situation as it is, okay? And now, which is a complete destroyed country, at least 80%, and the situation, how it was there.
Yes.
And we call this the Bedford scenario, and we have to compare these situations, and then we have to say this is the amount of the amount of reparation.
Yes.
And then
yes.
Then we have to take another point to say we will not rebuild as it was, but we will rebuild it in a better way, and therefore this difference, this must be on the shoulders of the international community, because we cannot rebuild a destroyed Gaza like it was before.
Yes,
because it will not stand.
I get it, sir. Thank you very much for this interesting point. I will go now to Dr. Makki. With the United Nations estimating that 90% of housing units in Gaza have been damaged, what strategies should be prioritized to address the housing crisis?
Well, after the return back of 300,000 or 400,000 people from the southern of Gaza to northern part today and yesterday, I think the priority for this is how these people, about their accommodation, where they want to sleep, where they want to, just to get their food and the water. So in order to be on the life and also to with the life. This is the first thing. They should, the Christian community should provide these people with the, assistance, especially with the necessary assistance, house, tents, and also with how could they, live, because they didn't, in the southern part, they didn't pick them with many of things, because they, as you know, they walked about 10 kilometers from the southern part to northern part. So the first thing is about their necessary things for their life. This is one thing. The other thing is about how could provide them with the electricity, with the water. Also, the ceasefire also should be continue, because today the Israeli bombed and killed some of them on the Netzarim road, and also for the future or after that, because as you know, according to the agreement, in the first stage, they should provide them with these things, and also to think how they could go ahead in the third stage, because in the third stages they are talking about to put a comprehensive plan for them for 3 or 5 years in order to rebuild, and also to remove from the first stage, they will remove all the demolition and also repair from the Israeli bombing. And they also, as you know, they destroy about 300,000 house and mosques and hospitals and also schools. So the priority is that to remove all these demolitions, all these repair, and after that to start thinking how could they support these people.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, our time is up. I apologize to you, my dear guests. We're running out of time, but I would like to thank my dear guest, Dr. Abdel Nasser Makki, political science professor. Thank you very much. And Dr. Majid Boudin, international law professor, joining us from Paris. Thank you very much. Thank you both for your special insights. Now, as the dust settles over Gaza, the road to reconstruction remains uncertain. Who will build? Who will pay? And who will decide its fate? The answers will shape history. This brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.